The mid-season tuning patch was just announced. It brings a few nerfs to the top performing specs that were unexpectedly buffed with a 0.5 patch, and also a few buffs to specs that were underperforming. Now they put out a nerf to all 5 specs that were considered to be part of the M+ meta. These specs were buffed 2 weeks ago when they released the 0.5 patch, and I think these nerfs take them back to roughly the same spot they were before the buffs. Devourer and Unholy got a 5% nerf. Unholy's was mostly focused on AoE. Org got hit lightly, only a 2.5% nerf. Resto Druid took a 5% healing nerf, and Brewmaster will have a longer cooldown on Purifying Brew and slightly less stagger. I think these specs will still all be very good. 2 more specs that got nerfed were Frost Mage and Outlaw Rogue. Frost Mage got a bug fix recently and they are nerfing it to counteract that. This nerf does amount to about 2% though. Outlaw Rogue was massively buffed with the 0.5 patch through one talent in the Trickster tree. They have heavily nerfed that talent and gave Outlaw a buff to compensate, but it all comes out as a 5% nerf in total to what we have now, which is possibly a bit unjustified. They did put out a few buffs to specs that weren't great. Frost DK got yet another aura buff, this time 5%. Maybe this is the one that makes it worth playing. BM Hunter got a 4% aura buff. Hunter got some buffs to Rapid Fire, Explosive Shot, and Arcane Shot that amount to about 5 to 6% DPS depending on your tree. Subrogue got the Outlaw Cloud Cover nerf as well, but they have the luxury of just dropping Cloud Cover and actually come out of this with a 2.5% buff. Affliction Warlock got a large buff in both single target and AoE. Arms Warrior got a single target buff, mostly targeting Slayer. This is partially counteracting a nerf from a Deep Wounds bug fix this week, but it is net positive. And Fury got a large buff all around, with 10% to Slayer and 6% to Mountain Thane. Enhancement Shaman got a reasonable buff alongside a bug fix nerf. Totemic is up by 5%, and Stormbringer is up by 8%, possibly a bit more in AoE. But they are fixing a bug where Thorims would always cast Spenders as if you had spent 10 Maelstrom. Sims do not have this bug fix modeled yet, so nobody knows how much of a loss it is. I am somewhat scared it will make the gameplay loop worse for Totemic by not providing enough CDR in Doomwinds. I think Enhance is still buffed regardless, and it should be viable, although I think Ellie and other specs will still pull ahead for most content. Stormbringer is probably viable now as well, although I think Totemic will still be a bit better. We did get the promised tank tuning patch, although it probably leaves a lot to be desired. Vengeance and Prot Paladin got an armor buff that amounts to about 4% physical DR. Prot Warrior got a damage buff. Guardian Druid got a single target nerf and a burst damage nerf, but they also got a massive buff of 200% to Thrash, which does significantly benefit some M+ builds and also should greatly help Threat. As mentioned before, Brewmaster was slightly nerfed, but it is still probably the strongest M+ tank, and Blood DK was unchanged. For healer tuning, we did have the Resto Druid nerfs, which makes sense as it was topping in both Raid and M+. Holy Paladin got another round of spender buffs, 15% to Word of Glory and Light of Dawn. I think we were at 55% buff to these spells over the last month. And Disc Priest got a nerf to Atonement when it is covering more than 5 people, and a small buff on Atonement when it is covering 5 or less people. Holy Priest got another aura buff. I think this spec has been buffed by like 35% since back in January. Now the big question we have is, will this affect the M+ meta? And I already think this is a reasonably balanced season. There is a team playing double Monk, Ellie Shaman, timing good keys. People are playing Warlock still, Resto Shaman is good, there are even some Fizz comps timing 22s. But it is a fact that Unholy, Devourer, and Org are by a large margin the best DPS right now. Only Arms Warrior is coming close, but their abysmal single target just drops them down a level. I think with these 5% nerfs, they will still be the best 3 specs for damage, but the margin will not be so great anymore, and it will undoubtedly be viable to play other good classes. Resto Druid is currently not oppressive at all. Resto Shaman and Mistweaver are basically just as good, and I think the healer meta will settle on those 3 specs. And Brewmaster is just going to be the best tank. Maybe Guardian Druid will have some potential. Also, I looked into if this would affect any guilds on Lura Prog. These nerfs probably amount to about 20k DPS loss, which will be entirely offset by the 1% buff next week. Now, I do not expect any more tuning after this. They might put out a buff patch where they buff really bad specs like Fire Mage, but I think they will let most things settle like they are for now.